see about that.
Right.
Okay, here we are. Charles Moscowitz. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Scott McKay is my guest. Scott is an author of fiction books. He wrote The King of the Jungle, which is available at Amazon and other book venues. And Scott, I find that it's often possible as a fiction writer for you to say things and write things that you cannot say when you're doing a nonfiction report. So
That's true.
this book is quite prescient in that it relates to the attempted assassination of President Trump and the way and the situation around that. So I kind of want to start there and just state the obvious, which is, to use a Shakespearean term in Hamlet, something's rotten in Denmark.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, King of the Jungle is kind of a political satire. And of course, those who are familiar with me know I'm a columnist at the American Spectator, and I have a site here in Louisiana that covers state and national politics. And I've written a couple of political books, The Revivalist Manifesto and Racism, Revenge, and Ruin, which is about the effect Obama has had on the country.
Right.
So I come at this from sort of a pundit background, but this is the fifth novel that I've written. And what I really wanted to do with it was to take a scenario, which was, this increasingly possible eventuality of Venezuela invading Guyana to get their oil wealth. And built a story around that. And the story is basically there's a sort of reclusive billionaire who builds a Shangri-La in the jungles of Guyana. And lo and behold, he gets the Venezuelans come after him. But it's based on the headlines. Like there's a corrupt left-wing administration. The president's name is Joe Deadhorse. He sends his goons after my billionaire guy. And then there's a Republican candidate whose name is Donnie Trumbull, and Donnie Trumbull's in Terre Haute, Indiana, and he gets shot. And it's as it's investigated, the Secret Service left giant holes in his coverage that allows the would-be assassin to get close enough to shoot him. And
right.
2 Saturdays ago, I'm like watching TV, and I was like, wait. This is like 86.4% my book. Like, what's going on here? As the events have kind of tumbled out and the details of this thing in Butler have tumbled out, like it's closer and closer to the book. And a week ago, I wrote a thing at the American Spectator, basically excerpting some of that from the book and say, look, what Donnie Trumbull did in the book was fire the Secret Service. Right? Like that Trump needs to do that too, because whether they're this incompetent or this was an inside job, which are really the only two possibilities that we have, and it's hard to dismiss either one of them. Either way, they can't provide security for this guy as many rallies and large events as he's going to do. The stakes on this are so high, it's unbelievable, because we were an inch or two away from being in a civil war right now.
It was a centimeter away from changing the whole world.
Absolutely.
World war. I mean, it just shows how vulnerable we are. And the FBI director, who's I think I would describe, and we have to be careful here because I'm running this on YouTube, but let's just say the head of the snake. He has
in Chris Wray, for sure.
He's admitted under oath at the recent testimony that several of the agents expressed regret that the shooter had missed. Now, the fact is that he also, the FBI, or not the Secret Service, has released a statement basically telling President Trump that they can't protect him if he does any more outdoor rallies, which seems to me to have been one of their goals, right? They've tried to muzzle him with gag orders. They've tried to, harass his family. They tried to bankrupt him. They've tried to put him in prison. I think that they genuinely thought a few weeks ago that they were going to put him in jail until that case was put off. And then there was a bullet flying and blows off a piece of his ear. So, they're now telling him not to go outside they're trying to do everything they can to impede him, to stop him, to slow everything down.
Yeah.
What should he do? I mean, those public rallies are something that he thrives on. He should, and in general, on principle, as an American candidate, he should be able to do that and do it safely.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think my answer is the one, right? You go and you hire maybe even a consortium of private security companies and do your security coverage the right way. I mean, there are lots of people out there, most of whom are probably Trump supporters, who are in that business, learned it well by being, snipers in the Marines or, law enforcement, or, I mean, there's a few different ways that you can develop a background to get good at personal security and those kinds of things. So there's a universe of folks out there that you could build a team from that would make your security coverage, I'm not going to say impregnable, because I don't know if there's any such thing, but certainly way better than this.
I mean, they could hire mercenaries. They could get Blackwater.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I would do. I would call Eric Prince and I'd say, hey, bring me some guys. That's, I mean, like, to me, that's the answer.
People, people who are, this was such a I mean, as you say, it was either a case of incredible incompetence, or it was some kind of an inside job. It was some kind of a complicity, at least. Yeah. And
Charles, let me because please. And I wrote another piece on this. The analogy, because you start saying inside job and people go, oh, here comes the tinfoil hat. The way that this almost certainly would have worked. Okay, the analogy is a crab trap. All right, I'm from Louisiana, so I know crab traps like really well. But like the way a crab trap works is you put bait in the middle of that trap and you drop it to the water bottom, and then you leave it alone. You don't do anything, okay? Because what you know is if there are crabs hanging around that water bottom, they're going to smell that bait. They're going to come and they're going to eat on it. And when you pick up that crab trap, you will have crabs. You didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to watch the trap. You didn't have to act at all. Once you drop that trap to the water bottom, the only thing to do is to wait a while and then pick it up. And that is, I think, the analogy here, which is like, for example, if you were to go and do a forensic examination of all of these Trump events this cycle, okay, you're going to find, my guess, at least in some, if not most or all of these events, some sort of fatal weakness in his coverage, right? Which is the bait in the crab trap. We're going to leave this open, and if there's a crazy, and by the way, the political people and the media people are stoking the crazies nonstop about how he's Hitler and he's a dictator. And, this will be the last election we ever have if Donald Trump.
End of democracy. Right. Yeah.
Right. The end of our democracy, which our democracy is not democracy.
It's a republic with democratic principles. Putting that aside.
It's a little different podcast. But, okay, you stoke these crazies and then you leave them a hole in the crab trap to come through. And then, eventually somebody's going to come eat on the bait. And I think that might have been what happened in Butler, because look. Yeah,
except they weren't threading it's sort of like a Roach Motel. They check in and they don't check out. But
they tell no tales.
They weren't doing that. They left this thing hanging there. I mean, the guy had like a full ladder that went all the way to the roof, and it was up there for something like a half an hour before the shooting. And this was in a building that had security people in it.
Right. And if you've ever been in a building with a metal roof, if somebody is crawling around on that roof, it's conspicuous. It's noisy.
It was seen by people. There were several people who saw it, and they did nothing. And he was up there with a automatic weapon, and nobody did anything about it.
Yeah, it was just, he got off 8 shots, at least. I mean, they found 8 shell casings. And if you'll remember, when Kim Cheadle was testifying before Congress, and they asked her, "Hey, how many shell casings were found on that roof?" She didn't. Oh, I can't. I don't know. I can't answer that question. She knew.
Right.
It's on video. And why can't she answer? What's that?
why can't she answer that question? A direct question from one of our elected members of Congress.
And it's a
That's
basic question to the investigation
yeah,
as
but
well.
that turns them into a rogue agency if they're not going to answer. I mean, I'm sure you've seen. This is maybe I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I'm sure you've probably seen these YouTube videos of all of these confirmation for judges, and you get some good senators like Cruz and
Yeah,
Hawley and
John
others.
Kennedy is my guy, and he's like a
Oh man,
master,
he is
right?
hilarious,
Yeah,
and he puts on this kind of folksy, accent, even though he's an Oxford scholar. But putting that
right,
aside,
right.
he's great at what he does, and they won't answer the question. And the fact is that should never be tolerated in this country. That's why we elect. They want to talk about democracy. Fine. Democratic principles are what this is that in action. Our elected representatives doing an investigation. That's what Congress has to do. That's what their job is.
Yeah,
And you have these evasive answers, especially from, in this case, an employee of the federal government, somebody
yeah,
who's being paid by taxpayer money, whether it be this Cheadle character or Ray or
right.
any of these other
Well,
people.
the
If
worst
they're
of
not
all of
going to
them is
answer a
Mayorkas.
question, what?
Mayorkas is the worst of all of them. I
Oh
mean,
my
this guy
God! The
goes in
guy,
front of the
it's
House,
almost,
the
yeah.
Senate, it doesn't matter. And I mean, it is a
Well, he doesn't.
stonewall.
He just lies. I mean, he
Yeah.
doesn't even evade. He'll just and he
Mhm.
knows he can get away with it. In fact, speaking of him, Congress has sent subpoenas to him, to Ray, to a bunch of agencies to ask questions about this assassination of a former
Yeah.
president attempt. And they've said, no, F you, we're
Yeah.
not coming. And they
Right.
said, save your documents. No, not giving you any documents. That is a rogue agency. They should be taken away in leg irons and put in
No
a
doubt.
cell until they release those documents. And if they want either that or they should resign, in which case they could then be charged with a crime. But the fact is that this is not acceptable in this country. If there's one, this is the worst element of the entire Biden regime. Putting aside its legitimacy, which is basically a function that underlies all of this. But the fact that this is the hallmark, all these people refusing to answer questions by our elected, democratically elected Congress.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just
No,
that's
no,
a
you're
major.
exactly right. And I mean, I've said this several times. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt anymore. And there's a legal principle called spoliation, and this is kind of directly on point with the radio comms recordings from Butler that have now disappeared. But the legal principle of spoliation is that if there is evidence and you've destroyed it, then the presumption is that evidence is damaging to you, right? So if they get rid of the radio comms from Butler, then we're absolutely entitled to believe that those radio comms probably put this whole thing in a very bad light, right?
I mean,
because it's
is a
not
felony.
standard procedure to destroy the recordings.
To go to a crime scene and clean it up, that's a felony. That's apparently they went to his house and they cleaned it up and sanitized everything.
Absolutely.
That's
the silverware away.
Yeah, really,
what's up with that?
I mean, this is a sign of guilt.
Well, the word was that house was like the parents are like hoarders. Like these guys were like super pack rats, and stuff was packed to the ceilings, stacked up to the ceilings in this house. And like they get there and the place is like immaculate. Like somebody came in and did a deep clean on the whole place.
What's that all about? I mean, this is tampering with evidence. Again, it's a felony. If whoever did this, anybody who understands the very basics of criminology and police work knows that you don't tamper with a crime scene.
Right.
It's not illegal, let alone ethical. And the fact that this has been sanitized, I mean, maybe they're hoping it goes away. Maybe they obviously missed. So now they're hoping to mop it up. Maybe that's why they had Biden announce that he's not running as a way to take attention away from this, because this is the biggest scandal.
And forcing Cheadle out. I mean, now it's okay. Well, we got rid of the Secret Service.
Yeah, right. And that was really, even the Democrats' heads were blowing up on that. She refused to answer any questions at all.
Yeah.
And she kept saying, well, this isn't, this is something that they've often said, ongoing investigation. Well, first of all, the investigation, the main investigation is being done by Congress itself. That's why they're there. And any other investigation is subordinate to that investigation. And for them to not answer questions under oath in public, because that's what the Constitution calls for, there's no reason for that. Yeah. There's no excuse for that. I mean, I suppose if it's the CIA, maybe you could say, fine, we'll take it in private, but they have to testify. It's that simple. They can't give an evasive answer. That is so outrageous. I mean, she should have been taken away in handcuffs until she answered those questions. I mean, It's just that simple. It was an absolute disgrace. And, it's been said, well, this is the worst case since the Kennedy assassination or since Reagan was shot. I think there are parallels between this and the Kennedy assassination, except now with the internet being what it is, and with people like yourself and people coming up, they can't do like a Warren Commission and wait 50 years and then dribble a few things out. It's a little bit more of a spotlight now because people can, people have cell phones. They can take pictures and cameras, and we have access to more information, regardless of how much they may use algorithm and censorship. We can still get it out. And one of the things that's very similar is the fact that the shooter, assuming that he was the only one, which with all those casings on the roof, we have to assume there was something more going on, but that they basically killed him immediately. That's like Oswald.
Yeah.
We're not going to hear testimony. There'll be no trial. There'll be no evidence. He's dead. So it all looks very kind of neat, very convenient.
I will say that with the 8 casings there, assuming they weren't dropped there, which they could have been dropped there. I mean, that's not hard to do. But I'm going to say that if that's legit and those 8 shell casings are legitimately spent and came from that rifle, I'm going to say this guy was probably the only shooter. Because if he got off 8 shots from that distance, it's actually a drop dead miracle that he didn't kill Trump, even shooting from iron sights. I mean, I will cop to that. Okay, you can make me believe that this is the only shooter. The question is, how does this guy get off 8 shots? Right? Like, how does he get off 1 shot when everybody knew he was up there? That's
right. Well, that's
like the clearest question. But once he starts shooting 8 shots, it should have been taken out after 1 shot. And so there's that issue, and I'm not trying to impugn the motives of the counter snipers or any of this kind of stuff, but the thing is what it is. And this is a level of performance from the Secret Service that under no circumstances should we tolerate. And the fact that we're getting nothing from them, and this is, at best, it's a CYA on incompetence. And, they're going to attempt to cauterize this by getting rid of Cheadle. But the fact of the matter is the entire agency needs to be taken out.
And also, I think that they've been focused on DEI, which I want to be careful here because we're live on YouTube, so I don't want to talk too much about. That's like a no-no at YouTube to criticize DEI. But let's just say that they weren't hiring people because they were the best people. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Well, and what we also know is they bring Jill Biden to Pittsburgh for some garden party or whatever, and she gets 12 Secret Service agents covering her, and they're left with 4 for Trump's rally with 50,000 people up the road in Butler.
Right.
She's indoors in a small event. I mean, there was no security threat to her.
No, of course not. Nobody cares about her.
Right. And so what Trump had in Butler was a bunch of temps from DHS's office pool, essentially, which, you can sit there, well, the Secret Service is obviously, and there's no question the DEI thing is real at Secret Service, but this wasn't Secret Service coverage for the most part. Right?
It certainly didn't look that way. I mean, based on that video we've all seen of that woman trying to put the gun in her holster.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming she was a temp from DHS, because I don't like, even with the new standards at the Secret Service, I don't think that quite qualifies
No,
for
no.
that level of government work.
And that he had 2 encrypted phones.
Yeah.
Is the FBI, not that I trust them to do anything, but is some agency going to be able to decrypt those and find out what was going on with that?
Well, it comes out yesterday that, like, apparently he had a Gab account that he last used in 2021. That Gab account proves that he's a Biden guy and not a Trump guy. So
why is that? I think Gab isn't Gab very conservative.
Well, Gab is a free speech app.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, there's a lot of, like,
I mean, I'm on Gab.
Yeah, and it's mostly a conservative app, but there's a contingent of hard lefties on Gab as well.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah. But I mean,
I don't even think it matters. I mean, the fact is that either he was a very experienced sniper or gunman, and he, with the drone flying over, and this is obviously very well plotted.
Yeah.
Or
he'd been planning something like this for a long time. Obviously, there's a shooting range that this guy and his father were a member of, that was where all the law enforcement people in the area trained. So it's like right under their noses was this kid. And look, you can go to the range and you can become proficient enough that a shot from 150 yards away, elevated, prone, even using iron sights, you can make that shot. Deer hunters make that shot all the time. Okay. I mean, it's a good shot, but it's not, you don't have to go through. I mean, it's been said it's a boot camp shot. Which is why you don't let anybody on that roof, right? I mean, that's the most obvious piece to this. And, so some of what this guy has done, I mean, it's not indicative of, CIA MK Ultra training, right? Like, we don't have to go that far on this. It's really more a question of, stoke up the crazies and, leave them opportunities. And sooner or later, you're going to get somebody who's capable. On the other hand, and I don't know how much of this stuff is true, because we get absolutely no official confirmation or denial of anything, which is, like you said, not how democracy works. But, there's the stories that this guy's got offshore encrypted bank accounts, that he's got, all of these things.
Plus, I mean, his cell phone traces him to an office near the FBI several times over the past year, he's gone there.
Right.
You have to ask. I mean, I think in most of these cases where you have somebody engaging in mass murder, or a shooter, usually some young screwed up guy, are they really just some nut acting alone, or is somebody tampering with their brain? I mean, is there something bigger going on here?
Right.
And I just think that's a question that needs to be addressed, because it seems to me that there is something bigger. You didn't have this kind of thing in the past. Something's happened.
And the thing is, Charles, we know, that is within the pattern of behavior of our government, right? Like, we know, for example, the Garland, Texas shooting, those guys had been recruited and ginned up by an FBI asset. Okay. The Christine Gretchen Whitmer.
The Gretchen Whitmer.
Fednapping thing.
Of the 24 guys, more than half of them were FBI or assets. And that came out during the trial, and now it's come out that she was in on it.
Yeah. I mean, so, like, this whole kind of thing, we know it's within the realm of what they've already done. So it's not a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory thing to bring this up.
This whole issue of criticizing people who question things, government, and calling it conspiracy, that was cooked up. My understanding is that was cooked up by the deep state, whoever, CIA, FBI.
I think it was
the
the CIA.
Trumanites, as Michael J. Glennon calls them in his book, The Double Government, which is a very interesting book, by the way. And he's a Fletcher School of Law Diplomacy professor emeritus, and he was a legal counsel to the U.S. Senate. He's an insider himself. and he wrote about this double government. That somebody cooked up this idea that anyone who claims conspiracy is a nut and is to be demonized and marginalized and wearing a tin hat. And that was in response to people who were criticizing the Warren report, you know, after the Kennedy assassination. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist because you don't think that some lone nut went out, lone communist like Oswald just went out and shot the president. Really? I mean, that's it. Claiming, questioning these things is part of freedom. If I may, it's part of democracy, right? Certainly. It's a hallmark of a free society. It's in an authoritarian society. You're not allowed to question anything. You know, they like to talk about democracy. Well, let's have it. Our media is we have a First Amendment right to free press and free speech. Not so you could go out and say the F word. It's so you can go out and investigate criminal and political conspiracies. Well, they happen all the time.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to come to, which is go back. I mean, 5 years, 10 years, whatever you want. I mean, they have lied to us, and it's been like clearly obvious from the very beginning of the official narrative that it was a lie with practically everything. I mean, it was
everything.
Russia collusion thing was a lie, and the COVID stuff was a lie.
The 2020 election, if I may, had some rather dishonest elements to it. Let's put it that way.
Of course it was. And, all of this stuff, I mean, it goes back to 2009 where, all of a sudden right-wing extremists are the number one terror threat to the American people. When they came out with that, it was right after Fort Hood, right? When you had an army captain who was a known jihadist goes and shoots up the whole base and kills, I don't even remember how many people. And the immediate reaction from the generals ahead of the army says, well, the real tragedy here would be is if we lost our diversity. It's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, there's a national security threat of people like this guy, and you have to deal with that. And they refuse to do it. We're lucky as hell that more Fort Hoods didn't happen, although there have been a good number of incidents like that. That haven't been super publicized. But the whole point is, like, we go all the way back to 2009, and our government has focused on its own people as the number one threat.
Right.
We've had external threats galore that they won't even deal with, and then they tell us lie after lie after lie, and now the Trump assassination thing is full of official lies that are obvious. And not even at this point so much lies as obfuscations that are, like, for example, Cheadle not being able to say how many shell casings were found on that roof when Congress is asking her. That's insane. Right. She knew that. So, and now we have this Joe Biden.
Apparently she's an insider, and that my understanding is that she was one of the people involved with cleaning up after the January 6th Capitol incursion.
That was another
she
destruction of recordings.
She deleted information that would have exonerated President Trump and would have shown what actually happened there. So she's a fixer. Anyways, I don't know if she doesn't strike me as being the brightest bulb in the chandelier. She's probably not like at the top.
No, but she's
more like one of these functionaries. They send them out. I mean, and to clean, these people are all, I mean, Merrick Garland, he cleaned up the Oklahoma City attack. Yeah. Right? I mean, he was the chief. They brought him in to make everything tidy. And so it would all look a certain way. And if you didn't accept the narrative, you were like a low life. I mean, you were like lower than human.
Yeah.
If we've seen this. We saw it with the pandemic of people who didn't question, they questioned the lockdowns and the jab. I don't want to go into that because, again, we're on YouTube. You can't. That's a no-no at YouTube. You can't criticize it. And I'm not a scientist. I'm just saying that people who didn't accept it were seen as lower than human. I mean, there were calls for put them in concentration camps. It was almost like what the Nazis said about Jews. Again, I don't want to go too far into that.
But it's another example of the official narrative being patently untrue. I mean,
exactly.
And identifiable as untrue from the very beginning. And so it leaves you with this, internal debate in your own mind is, okay, like, are these guys just not up to the task? Are they just totally incompetent, or is there something more? And there's the old adage, never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence. And I used to believe it. Like, I used to believe that. But when you get to like Butler, for example, incompetence doesn't explain this. Okay.
Right.
Because there are well-established procedures for how the Secret Service does VIP security, particularly in a situation like that. This whole thing, well, this was outside, that rooftop was outside of our perimeter. And it's like, there's no law that says your perimeter is 100 yards and that's it. That's not like that. No, the perimeter includes everything that could be a threat. And that rooftop was the single most obvious threat to the president, or the former president. So obviously it's in your perimeter. And then, whether these two guys sitting in that second story of that building were Secret Service. I mean, I've heard that they were Secret Service people. I've heard they were local law enforcement. I don't know which is true. But if they were Secret Service guys, then what? The roof is not part of the perimeter, but the second floor is? I don't.
Well,
none of it makes sense. It's all.
And they
all
kept changing that story also. I mean, the roof, they don't go on sloped roofs, and then it was too hot.
Right.
I mean, first of all, what kind of answer is that? This is what, are they, too wussy or something? I mean, this is their job.
Well, I mean, it's Carlos Jimenez, who's the congressman from, I think he's from Miami, is a Republican. He was one of the people that went to Butler when they did that little junket over there that you saw. Like, Eli Crane had all the footage that he took from. Jimenez is 70 years old. He's walking around on that roof.
I mean, look, I don't get it. May be too hot. That's your job. That's what you're there to do.
Lay the blanket. Lay the blanket down so you're not sitting directly on
McKay, what are you recommending therefore? Because President Trump, he has now agreed, unfortunately, and I don't blame him, by the way, that he's not going to do outdoor rallies. He's going to do indoor because they're easier to secure. But I don't know, putting myself in his shoes, I don't know if I'd go out with the Secret Service watching anything. I mean, he's a billionaire. I mean, maybe he should shell out a few dollars for security himself. I don't know, the campaign.
Well, that's absolutely what I would do. I would go. I mean, I would accept what help I could get from the Secret Service on things like intel and stuff like that they have actually the power for. But I would hire up an army of private security people. That's what I would do. And I might do indoor events for a while I was staffing my thing up and making sure my team was good. But like, I wouldn't agree that, okay, I'm never going to do an outdoor event again.
No.
He's
going to have to use a Pope mobile, like after John Paul was shot.
Well,
he'd go out in. I mean, it's sad, but he'd go out in this gigantic rectangular box, bulletproof box. I mean, look, that's what it's come down to. But in this brief time, President Trump had better be careful. They've tried everything to take him out, and these people mean business. They're not messing around. There are powerful forces in this country that do not want to see Trump in office because they could end up in prison, for one thing. But secondly, because he's going to take them on. He's taking on the same people that John F. Kennedy took on. This is the same group.
Yeah.
I mean, not literally, but it's the same. It's as I said, it's
interests for sure.
Yeah.
And some of these people have changed parties since then. Some of them have not.
It's not relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, it's, and then you get this all the time. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be assassinations. Like, I go back to what happened to the Tea Party, for example. Like, that was a populist revolt against a government that was becoming more obnoxious all the time and was overstepping its bounds, and it ginned up an enormous popular discontent, and so the Tea Party was born. And what did they do? They sicked the IRS on every single one of these Tea Party organizations and bankrupted them with legal costs and everything else. And by 2012, the Tea Party was not able to organize around a particular presidential candidate. And so you got Mitt Romney, right? who, as we have later found out, is involved in all of this kind of stuff. He's got a son who was involved in Burisma, and like in other words,
he's part of the whole rotten, corrupt regime.
And before Romney, it was McCain, and McCain was mobbed up with the same crowd.
Well, I mean, I think in the case
agreed to stand his campaign down when the financial crash hit, which is political malpractice on an unprecedented scale that he did that. I mean, so you've got, you call him the uniparty or whatever you want, but like you've got an insider element within American politics and government now that is exceptionally resistant to any challenge from anyone. It's been calling people cranks for a long time. It's been infiltrating corporate America, particularly in all things like advertising and now social media, so that if you're not accepting of official narratives, they're going to punish you financially and in other ways. And then, Trump comes along, who is big enough and rich enough that they can't cancel him the way that they would, all these other people. And people latch on to Trump, even though politically, I think the guy was a good bit of a neophyte. And the first term of his time in office could have been more successful if he knew what he was doing.
Right.
And now he's a major threat because he went through over the last 8 years. He's got a graduate level education on this kind of stuff. And so it really is an existential threat to, the deep state or the uniparty or whatever you want to call it, this cabal, this entity that has this disproportionate amount of power in America now. Like, this is probably the largest threat they've ever faced. And so given those circumstances and the demonization of Trump and the wide open opportunity that was left, it's damn near impossible to believe that all of this was happenstance. It just wasn't.
Well, and now it's been, I mean, the most obvious exposure now is that, putting aside the legitimacy of the 2020 election, they lied about Biden's mental capacity all these years. Yes. And everybody knows this. I mean, we certainly knew it from day one, but now it's becoming obvious to everyone, especially after that debate. Not that it always wasn't, but they can't get around that. The man is not playing with a full deck. I mean, look, I'm not saying that to be mean. It just is what it is. Right. And so what they've done now is they've scuttled him. They've probably threatened him by telling him that they're going to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him from office. So you have all the insiders. You've got Big Mike and Obama, and you've got, all of them are basically shuttling, it's like a coup. They've forced him out. So it looks like they're going to put Kamala in, and I don't think that that's going to fly. I mean, she'll get all of the hard left excited, but that's not the majority in this country.
She's not sellable. And
no, I mean, they'll have I don't think the left, going all the way back a century, they've ever really come up to more than 20 to 25% of the country. They may be loud, and they may have the control of the high ground in the media and culture, but the reality is that that's not really where America is, including most Democrats, frankly. And so I don't think that they're going to pull her over the finish line. I mean, they've got just 12 weeks to sell her, and I don't see it. So I think that the question, therefore, is, what are they going to do now to stop Trump? I mean, they tried just everything in the book.
Well, it gets scary from here. Okay, because you've already had.
I think something really ugly is coming down.
Yeah, I mean, you've already had one, would-be assassin, and the interesting reaction to that was they pulled the plug on Biden. Right. Clearly, that was a palace coup. I mean,
and I don't think it would have happened if Trump had taken the bullet either.
Well, no, because I mean, Michael Whatley, who's the chair of the RNC, was on, I think it was Clay and Buck's show, the Monday of the convention, and they asked him, well, what would have happened if that bullet had been an inch to the right? And Whatley was like, well, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be able to run a convention. How do you run a convention? You don't have a candidate. He's like, we would have had to postpone the thing and try and figure out what we were going to do, because there was no way we could come to Milwaukee in the wake of that and do, conduct business.
Right.
Like the whole convention would have been invalid. Now you got to draw up a new agenda. So, and they didn't have a vice presidential candidate that they could say, okay, well, I guess this is our guy. Like they couldn't have gone to Vance because he hadn't picked Vance at that point.
That's right.
So like, and that would, so this is Watley. So if that thing happens, there's no Republican candidate. And really what would have happened, and okay, fine. Here comes the tinfoil hat. That bullet takes Trump out. Okay.
God forbid.
Almost certainly there would have been reprisals. Somebody would have gotten pissed off enough to take a pot shot at some Democrat. Okay. Like that would have happened.
Which is what they probably wanted.
Yes. Because then you get to do January 6th across the country.
Exactly. The concentration camp doors would be swinging open. People would be swept in. No, I agree.
All of the Trump supporters, like we've been telling y'all about right-wing extremists for 20 years now. And see,
it's that close. It's that close. So they have all of our names. They know where we are. There would have been a massive sweep. No, I totally. It would have been like it would be like the Reichstag fire, right? I mean, it would have enabled them to declare martial law. They were pushing for that during the pandemic. It's one of the reasons they hate Trump is because he refused to do it.
Charles,
they wanted. You had Cuomo and you had De Blasio and all these left wingers. We need martial law. We need to have the army come out to lock everyone down like they do in communist China. Trump didn't do it. He was very. I think he could have been even more moderate, but nevertheless, he left it up to the states. So you had these little dictator fascists like Whitmer in Michigan banning the right to buy, gardening seeds, but you could buy booze. Just these crazy laws.
For 20 years, okay, there has been an ever increasing amount of pressure, provocation against normal Americans. And I can't remember who wrote it, but there was a book that one of the big Obama people had written. It was called The Nudge, I think was the name of the book. And it was all about, hey, here are all of the different things that we're going to do to the American people that will force them into the mindset that we want, right? More compliant with government authority, willing to accept national health care, all of that, right? And it was kind of a roadmap because you kept seeing attacks on religion, for example. We have, we're for religious freedom, but you got to keep that in the church. If you bring it out in commerce, we're gonna tax it, or we're gonna regulate it, we're gonna do whatever. And you had Hobby Lobby and the Little Sisters of the Poor case. They used Obamacare to keep these religious oriented companies from engaging in the marketplace. And then you have all of these different ways that they've gone about forcing the culture into a left-wing sort of paradigm. And
just to give a little historical background to that, I think it goes back to the Johnson Amendment in the 1950s. Lyndon Johnson, a senator, he got through legislation by which a church or a religious organization, their tax status would be threatened if they said anything political. I mean, it was okay for the Reverend Jesse Jackson to talk political in a church. That's fine. But if you're conservative and you talk about social issues, whatever, forget it. You can't. And you'll notice that they don't actually for that reason.
Well, don't think for a second that those 85,000 IRS agents are not going to be tasked with, crawling up the church with a fuller brush to give it an examination. Okay. I mean,
no, absolutely. And the rest of us. So, I mean, this whole scenario that you lay out would have been, it's not going to take much to trigger it. I still think they're going to find a way to do that before the election. I mean, they're already starting to paper the House with ballots. I've already gotten one in the mail. I didn't ask for it. I mean, and I'm in Massachusetts. Okay, fine. But, this is they're not going to sit for this. I just don't see it. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to get ugly. If I were Trump, I would pull up the drawbridge around Mar-a-Lago with an iron, fence, and I'd stay there and be quiet for the rest of the election, right? And just, put like,
send Vance out to do the campaign.
yeah, it could look like a medieval, Gothic castle. You get people out there, ready to man the walls with oil, and if anybody comes near them.
Well,
and just,
there's a model of doing this, which is, you get up a whole cavalcade of folks and you go do the road show. But Trump stays in Mar-a-Lago and he's the big head on the video screen, right?
That's right. Exactly. Have the rallies with him coming through Zoom.
Yeah.
I think we would all understand, we'd all get it. The point is that he has to stay safe. He has to have.
Well, what he could say is, hey, the Secret Service told me that I can't do outdoor rallies. So I'm here at Mar-a-Lago because I got shot and I don't know. I'm not going to get shot
exactly. Again.
And
he should bring his family behind the wall too. And just keep everybody.
Look, what he could say is like, I've been saying all along, they're not out to get me. They're out to get you. I'm just in the way.
That's right.
I can't be there. They have taken that away from me and from you.
He would get, not only would he get anything but sympathy from the American people, but I think he would increase in numbers. I think that everybody will get that, whether you like him or not. I mean, you understand what's going on here. It's been obviously out there.
What would happen is the left's propagandists and the media would then come like, oh, look at Trump, what a coward he is.
Nobody's going to take them seriously. F them. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to listen to that.
Well, I know. My point is they're going to discredit themselves even more,
right?
And make it so like they can't even criticize Trump. It's like, wait a minute, he got shot, and you called him a coward because he didn't put himself back out there when they told him that they couldn't give him security for an outdoor event. Like,
I agree.
In other words, you're going to make these guys. You're going to make Joy Reid an even bigger idiot than she is already if you bait her into that kind of commentary.
Yeah, I mean, they're already there. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's paying attention to them. And that's just what I would hope that what Trump does. Seriously, he shouldn't go outside. He should just stay put. Doesn't need to even say much. Just stay put and stay safe and dribble the ball down to the election. That's all. Wait till the clock runs out. I mean, it's just that simple.
Well,
so, Scott,
in a week, I think you're going to see, and I don't even really believe in this kind of sugar high that they're now trying to foist onto the American people about Kamala Harris. In a week, all of that's going to be gone.
Oh yeah, that's going nowhere. They're like, and they're using the same old cynical playbook that Americans don't buy. That she's black, which, by the way, not to get into a subject, but she didn't really identify as black until she got into politics.
I mean,
she grew up in Canada.
She's beige at best.
No, who knows if she's black? I mean, but either way, the point is that Americans are not that cynical that they're going to go, oh, this, I'm going to vote for someone because of their skin tone or because they have a vagina. They're just not going to do it. We did that already with Obama. And Obama, by the way, he was fine. I mean, people either like him or not, but the point is that his being black had nothing to do with anything.
Right.
He was as good or as bad as he would be had he been white. And I generally think he just continued on with Bush. It was like Bush Part 2.
Well, in many respects, that's correct.
I mean, there was nothing particularly distinctive about his presidency due to his race, other than that he was black, which I think was good. But it's not like the novelty of that is gone. I don't think that people care, that much. And I pointed out, by the way, speaking of Obama, that he won his Senate seat in a special election in Illinois, and his opponent was a hero of conservatives. Had his opponent won that election and had his opponent gone on to be president, he would have been a national hero for all conservatives, and that was Alan Keyes. And he's black. So it had nothing to do with race. The whole thing was just, I don't think people are buying this narrative at this point. It just doesn't fly, except for the far left. They're operating in some kind of a weird bubble. They still think that this is something that they can run with, but they're just talking to themselves. And their numbers are diminishing. And the Trump derangement numbers are diminishing also.
Well, at
I
some
mean, they're
point,
still
people
out there, and I know some of them. They'll
yeah,
go to the grave with this irrational hatred of Trump, and they don't understand why. But those numbers, people are tired of that already. It's been
well,
7 years of it.
Charles, I'll leave you with this prediction, okay? Which is, she's going to pick a VP candidate, or her people will pick a VP candidate in the next couple of days.
Right.
I could be wrong about this, but my prediction is it's going to be Buttigieg. It's going to be Buttigieg for the same reason that Richard/Rachel Levine was hired as the number 2 guy at HHS, and Sam Brinton got picked as the guy that run the nuclear stockpile. Okay, which is the outrage. They're going to stoke the outrage on the right and actually in the center, which is a mistake on their part, by picking someone purely on identity politics who is obnoxious about their membership in that identity. Okay, Pete Buttigieg,
which by the way, most conservatives again don't care if he was taking the right
Nobody
position.
cares if he's gay. Okay, if Trump had picked Richard Grinnell to be his VP,
we would have been a national hero.
Perfectly fine with it. We would have loved it because we like Grinnell.
No, for sure. Because of his positions, we want somebody who's going to improve the economy. We want somebody who's going to stop World War III. I mean, this is nothing to do. Nobody cares about that at this point.
But Buttigieg, whose record, by the way, is even worse than Kamala Harris's is, right? Like, this guy destroyed the supply chain and has made air travel like not even a possible thing in this country, basically. But he's obnoxiously gay, right? Like, and wears it on his sleeve. And so if you object to Buttigieg, you're a bigot. You're a homophobe.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. I don't think that. I don't think that narrative goes outside of the people they already have, and that's only.
It doesn't.
And which is why I think they're going to pick Mark Kelly.
Well, Obama wanted Mark Kelly as the open convention nominee. That's what Obama wanted. The question, and he didn't get it because Harris. Biden goes and endorses Harris, which was
because they can't challenge a black woman, and that's what they're stuck with.
Well, I think there's, and I think it was William Sullivan at the American Thinker first put this out that I saw, which was the analogy is Duke Leto Atreides from Dune, when they've defeated him and he's lying on the ground dying, but he's got the poison tooth in his mouth. And he, chomps down on it and releases the poison, and he almost kills Baron Harkonnen. I think there's an element of that in what Biden did, picking Harris, which is to say, you may get me out, but you're not going to get everything you want. And so how much of that plays into Harris's choice, I don't know. The Biden people polled Harris against Trump extensively in the 3 weeks after that debate. And every poll she was getting clobbered. And initially they brought that to the Obama people saying, look, this is not the solution. And that was when Obama fell off of Harris. At the same time, he started going, he had George Clooney write that op-ed at the New York Times and did this entire thing where he basically collapsed Biden's support from underneath him when Obama was the one that provided it in the first place. So he totally betrayed Biden.
Oh, they completely threw him out like you throw out a.
But what nobody gets, and it's like nobody understands what an egomaniac Joe Biden is, and they don't understand how vicious the guy is. Okay, like Joe Biden is a very, very, very vicious guy. So you stick the knife in his back, and he's going to get you some kind of way. And endorsing Harris. And getting the party jumps in behind her, which is a dead loser. This is Joe Biden's way to stick it to Obama, because if they take this massive beating, and everybody remembers that Obama was an initial supporter of Harris all the way back to 2020, and of course Harris's administration, if she gets one, and this kind of co-presidency she's going to have for the next 6 months, it's all still Obama people, okay.
Right.
So plus his brand is on this, whether he likes it or not. And if she gets annihilated this fall, which if you have a free and fair election, she's going to get annihilated. But if she
Right.
gets annihilated this fall, okay, it'll be the end of Obama, because the party is going to have to go spend its time in the wilderness and rejigger itself or whatever. So Biden will have taken Obama out.
It could be like McGovern, you know. I mean, there was such a total defeat that it could take them 30 years before they come up with a centrist like Bill Clinton.
Or a more recent analogy to that is Dukakis, right? Dukakis gets annihilated, and then you have the New Democrats that Bill Clinton was the leader of, and that's
right. And also, I mean, this really interesting video shows that Biden was, in a sense, blackmailing Obama as the secretive gay man. You might have seen this.
I've heard about it. I haven't actually seen it, but I'm sure that's true.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's like, well, I mean, I know that Senator Obama has been tested for AIDS recently, and there's no shame in that. We know why that was like. And then Obama stood up and he chimes in. He goes, "Yes, both me and my wife Michelle were tested."
Right.
But it's interesting. Anyway, so Scott, how can people get your excellent book?
Well, it's available at Amazon. Just look up Scott McKay or King of the Jungle. This thing's got 4.8 stars. Everybody who's read it loves it. It's brutally, hilariously funny. It's very fast moving, and it's actually my 5th novel. I wrote a series of kind of action, adventure, epic fantasy things a while ago before I started writing some political books. But King of the Jungle, I think, is the best thing I've ever written, and I get it. I think you'll love it. It's available, Kindle, hardback, and paperback. So check that out. Find my stuff. I'm at spectator.org. I'm a senior editor at the American Spectator. Go to thehayride.com and also reviver.com, which is RVIVR.com. I'm the publisher of both of those 2 websites.
Excellent. All right, Scott McKay, thanks so much for joining me as always. Really appreciate